Hey, Biology 30. Let's get started with lesson 4. Good day. Okay, right off the bat, let's share the screen and get our notes going. Make sure you got your notebook and right along with me because, yeah, we know the brain needs that participation to really get the learning going. I mean, it's critical to be paying attention to learn. It's number one. So get your notebook, get your pen, and let's rock and roll. Here's our lessons. I'm just going to set this up so I can see it properly. Yeah, all right, lesson 4. Again, with me in your notebook, let's do a quick review of last time, yesterday. Critical things were the parts, 3 types of neurons related to the reflex arc. I'll come back up to there, but let's go with 3 types of neurons. Just want to center the screen properly. Here we go. And our notes. We looked at 3 types of neurons yesterday. And yeah, write this with me. Also, try to remember those 3 types of neurons. Also, write it a little neater than I do. Number 1, we've got sensory neurons. And sensory neurons do what they say they do. They sense. Your eyes have rods and cones. Those are specific sensory neurons. Receptor endings, actually specifically the rods and cones in our eyes, on our retina, are the receptor ends, and then boom, there's a sensory neuron, the optic nerve. Next, the sensory neuron takes the information from your senses to your brain and spinal cord, the interneurons. Interneurons, okay, so that doesn't directly say brain and spinal cord, but it does now in your mind, because interneuron, as soon as you hear it, you need to think, okay, that's the brain and spinal cord. Makes sense. You see something, your brain has to then think about it. So the optic nerve, the sensory neuron, takes that information into your brain neurons or your interneurons. So sensory, interneuron. And third type is motor neuron. So if I see a bear, ooh, my sensory neuron first picks that up. It doesn't actually think. The thinking goes on in the brain, in the interneurons. So it goes from sensory neuron, interneuron goes, oh, bear. And then motor neuron, do not start running. You are going to feel like running, but, just turn around and quietly walk away. And again, your motor neurons are going to be working. They would connect to things like muscles. Right here, these axon terminals on the motor neuron would connect to a muscle. Now let's look at the reflex arc. Again, we looked at this yesterday. So this is just a review. We've got a reflex arc right here, and you can see all those 3 parts. You've got your sensory neuron, and there it is right there, literally a wire, running to the interneuron. Now in the spinal cord, when it's a reflex, it doesn't have to go all the way up to the brain for your arm to move. If it did, you'd burn your hand off because you wouldn't move fast enough. So literally the spinal cord can quote unquote think, and it can say move. And that's what happens. That's why it's called a reflex. So it goes from sensory neuron to interneuron, and then we've got the motor neuron right here in blue. And look what the motor neuron connects to, a muscle, and you just jerk your hand away. I do not suggest you test this. You probably already have inadvertently stuck your hand on something very hot. This is a model for how the whole nervous system works, basically, is that you have sensory neurons, interneurons, and motor neurons. We have motor pathways. We can't move properly unless we're sensing, unless then we're thinking, and then we can move. And often this can happen very automatic, especially with a reflex arc, but also in sports. If you practice a sport enough, you can do a movement pretty well automatically. What else did we look at yesterday? We looked at the brain. Key structures in the brain, the 4 lobes of the brain. You got to know what each part does. And then, of course, also the hypothalamus, which is actually a link between the nervous system and the endocrine system, the pituitary gland, so hormones and stuff. The pituitary gland actually releases a lot of hormones that control us, that help us live, help us grow, help us digest. Hypothalamus, though, actually signals the pituitary gland. Medulla, That's going to make my heart go like crazy when I see that bear. And this is the big thinking center right here, the cerebrum. It's about the first centimeter over the whole brain. Okay, that was yesterday. What about today? Again, riding along with me. Here's what we're going to learn today. Oops. Some key things today. Key parts of the peripheral nervous system. We looked at the central nervous system, which is the brain and spinal cord, but today, and have this written in your notes, key parts of the PNS, or the peripheral nervous system. Peripheral means outside. Let's just put it right here so you've got it. You have your somatic. Literally, that word means body. So this is your sensory neurons. And this is also your motor neurons, right? Think about your arm, for example, because it's not central, it's peripheral, it's outside of, your brain and spinal cord are right here in the center. So peripheral nervous system, your arm has got senses and it can move. Sensory neurons, motor neurons. Also, the peripheral nervous system includes some autonomic or automatic, but we call it autonomic, but it's automatic. Autonomic. Again, write this down, say it. Two major things in the autonomic systems that's automatic. If we're suddenly scared, it's the sympathetic system. Write it down and say it. Sympathetic, I'm scared. It's going to be automatic. Boom, 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 boom. But also what is automatic, when you're very, very tired at night or you've eaten a lot of food, you're going to need to rest. And that's the parasympathetic. This literally puts you to sleep with a P. Put me to sleep. And if you stay up long enough, your body's going to put you to sleep. And it's going to be the parasympathetic system that takes over. Don't test that. Don't try to stay up like a long, long time, because it's not really healthy. But if you had to, eventually you would just be, your body would just put you to sleep, because that's how it works. We have to sleep. And that's all in the peripheral nervous system. So yeah, things like your arms and legs, you can move them. You have control, conscious control. But there's lots of automatic things happening, whatever, in your heart, in your lungs, in your digestive system. Lots of automatic things happening, all in the peripheral nervous system. Because again, the central is just the brain and just the spinal cord. Well, there's lots more to you than just your brain and spinal cord. So you're going to need to know the key parts of the peripheral nervous system. Number two, that the peripheral nervous system, and yeah, just call it the PNS. The PNS regulates, and how does it regulate? We're going to look at that. So it regulates somatic. Well, it helps us move. In other words, this is the conscious part. And the autonomic, the automatic. And that's an example right there. There's an automatic, a reflex arc. So we've already been looking at this already yesterday. So we're just going to kind of continuing with what we're learning. Basically, a great way to understand this whole regulation is to compare the sympathetic. Again, when we're scared, what happens? Think about what happens. Boom, 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 boom. Heart rate goes up, breathing goes up. Versus parasympathetic. What happens when you're sleeping? You're breathing slowly. Your heart rate slows down. This is the fight system, or fight or flight. F-L-I-G-H-T. So you need to fly. You need to run for your life or fight for your life versus sleep. Digest and sleep. Let's start with the autonomic and somatic system. So yeah, I'm going to flip the slide. At any point, just pause if you need to pause. Okay, just going to zoom out a bit. And boom, 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 zoom in. There we go. We got our two systems here. Basically, you've got two things, somatic, which is voluntary, or autonomic, involuntary. If you're running for your life, I mean, obviously there's some consciousness going on there, but ultimately your body is going to move itself if it thinks it's going to be hurt. And obviously, if you're suddenly face to face with a bear, you might need to actually try to control that and not just run for your life. But also just digesting. It's just an automatic thing. You don't need to, oh, I gotta turn my stomach a little bit here. You don't have to think about that. You just get to eat the burger and go to sleep. Okay, so let's write down some things here. If you do the following, what's happening? What if we raise our arm? Which of the two systems? Which one is that? Somatic or is that autonomic? So you are thinking raise arm, or right now you're taking notes, so basically your arm's moving. So which system is involved in you taking notes and you moving your arm? Autonomic. Try to spell it right, Phil. I'll let you fill that out because I think you know, but I'll fill it out at the end. What if you are feeling hungry? What system is sending you a message if you feel hungry? What about thirsty? What if you feel thirsty? Which system? What about playing a guitar? What system is that? I think I spelled it right. If I didn't, make sure you do. That's supposed to be guitar. What if your heart rate is just suddenly going like crazy? And that could be you see something and it goes way up, or you're out running and your heart rate starts to go up. And what about during sleep? Which system? Let's just see that we can see our whole, well, let's zoom out a little bit. There we go. And ultimately, yeah, just fill this out. I'll just use my mouse here. There we go. And I think those might be in the same category, right? This one here, this one here. This is a beautiful table. Make a more beautiful one in your notes, please. Here we go. Go back to my marker. Okay. If I raise my arm, that is definitely me thinking and me deciding to do that. So it is somatic. It is under conscious control. Where's my little, there it is. If I feel hungry, that just happens. That's automatic. If I feel thirsty, that's just automatic. What about playing guitar? Right? I'm thinking about it. If you practice enough, it does become kind of automatic, but it still is in conscious control. Heart rate is not under conscious control. I mean, you can excite yourself and get it going, but you can't really, not like how your body does. And sleep, yes, you decide when to go to sleep, but at a certain point, you will not be making the decision. Your body just puts you to sleep. There's the two systems. Let's look at the somatic system in a little bit more detail. Just talk about it a little bit more here. And I just want to add a little bit of paper. Again, if you need to pause the video, just pause it. So our somatic system, it's largely under voluntary control. If you do touch your hand to a really hot object, it'll move automatically. But in general, your arms, your legs, you control them. Especially your fingers, obviously, you're controlling those. The sensory system, so our eyes and the touch here, our ears, that's also the somatic system. It relays information to our brain, to our CNS, to our interneurons, right? We got our motor neurons as well. So these are key parts of the somatic system. Let's just kind of write a bit of summary notes here. So essentially somatic, which is, again, voluntary, includes sensory neurons. Now you're writing that down, but think of examples of sensory neurons. Eyes, ears. field of touch. But also, obviously, your arm not only can feel stuff, your arm can. So it's also motor neurons. What else I'll tell you here? Yeah, ultimately, that reflex arc, like I talked about, it is obviously not an example of the somatic system. It's the somatic system being used by the automatic system. So let's talk about the automatic system because it's a good kind of, this arm right now in this picture, I assume it's a guy. It could be a lady as well. But ultimately, it's I'm pretty sure they're just kind of flexing, just kind of moving it. But it could have touched something hot and just moved it away real fast. Ultimately, yeah, let's talk a little bit about the automatic system now, because you got the overview of the voluntary or the somatic system. Let's look at the automatic. Here's my next slide right here. And yeah, specifically the reflex arc itself, which we did talk about yesterday. So this is kind of a quick review. You touch something hot, this will happen automatically. Sensory neuron, a receptor is stimulated, number one. Number two, that neuron depolarizes. So we know that whole process, the action potential is suddenly released, it goes from resting to action potential. Sensory neuron, then to the interneuron, the brain, in this case, spinal cord. So the spinal cord does, quote unquote, think here, and then it's going to send a message to the motor neuron to move, and the motor neuron stimulates the muscle to contract. So let's write these steps out. Gone over them, but yeah, write them down. So reflex arc. Okay. Number one, sensory neuron is stimulated. Number two, sensory neuron depolarizes. As you're writing that out, think about that depolarization a little bit, right? Oh yeah, we've got an action potential. The neuron is just at rest. Sorry, got a resting potential. The neuron is just at rest. And we're going to change that to the actual action potential, the depolarization. It needs to be stimulated. And if you poke it really hard with a sharp tack, you're going to pull away from a sharp tack. That's not going to be pleasant. Third step, right after the sensory neuron is depolarized, then the interneuron is depolarized. Just go ditto, depolarizes. From the interneuron to the motor neuron. Motor neuron depolarizes. Ditto means copy. Step 5, muscle contracts. And the motor neuron stimulates the muscle to contract. In actually the same way that neurons talk to other neurons, they send a message, they send a chemical message to the next neuron. Does the same thing to your muscle, just sends the exact same chemical message, which essentially stimulates it, makes it move, makes it contract. Okay, so we've gone through the reflex arc. Let's look into more detail now into the autonomic system, the involuntary system. Definitely this is an involuntary act, a reflex arc, but there's more than just reflex arcs, although you need to know those 5 steps and have those memorized. Hint. Gonna add a little bit of paper. Here we go. Again, make sure you've got the notes printed in front of you and that you're taking notes on top of the notes, and then you review these tonight and summarize them. So your autonomic system is made up of 2 key parts. Let's just kind of make a bit of a graphic here in our notes. Just recording. You got your sympathetic. Oh, we talked about this right at the beginning. If I'm scared, that's going to be put into play. Or parasympathetic. So if I want to be put to sleep, it's my body that's going to be putting me to sleep. Just try to fit this in. I tried, but it couldn't. Again, just write a little neater than I am. So these are the two key parts. We're just doing kind of a system diagram here. You got the overall involuntary system, automatic system. Now these are the two major key parts. The sympathetic, if you're scared, if you need your heart rate to go through the roof, that's the one that's going to be activated. If you're needing to be put to sleep, the parasympathetic will be activated. So yeah, over here, heart rate goes up. Over here, heart rate goes down. Over here, breathing rate goes up. Over here, I think you know. I'll fill it in. What about digestion? If you're running for your life, is your body going to keep digesting? No, it stops. Versus over here, digestion. I think you know, right? Oh yeah, that goes down. Well, obviously this starts. Epinephrine, you need to know that word, and you probably have definitely heard that word. It makes your heart rate go through the roof. Epinephrine is released. So that's specifically what's going to make your heart rate go through the roof. And also cortisol, another hormone you need to know, is released. Both of these basically do help, well, especially cortisol helps glucose, so blood sugar goes up. Cortisol is really interesting. It can actually break muscle down and turn it into glucose. So too much cortisol isn't great. Yeah, this is the fight or flight. Over here, this is the rest and digest. Okay, those are your keynotes there. So just pause if you don't have them just yet. Just hit pause because I want to just go through this. So autonomic system, it's under involuntary. So it's not conscious, it's unconscious control. You can't control it. Some people think they can. And maybe super duper meditation stuff can, but definitely it's not really normally under control. Medulla oblongata, that structure in the brain, is critical. It controls a lot of this system. Autonomic nerves either stimulate or inhibit endocrine glands. I mean, ultimately, we're still talking about some of the peripheral nervous system, just some of the motor neurons. We've got motor neurons that are stimulating our stomach. They're just not under conscious control, right? So, but it's still a motor neuron. Two divisions, sympathetic or you're scared. So it's going to be fight or flight, or parasympathetic, put me to sleep. Rest, digest. And this is what we're talking about controlling here. So you don't set your heart rate. You don't think, I think my heart rate should be about 100 right now, and you somehow make it go 100. It's not possible. You also do not suddenly tell your stomach to start digesting, and you don't kind of think about, okay, I got to now roll it. I got to roll the food around. That just all happens automatically. Okay, let's look at next two slides here. I'm going to pop a couple slides together. So we're going to go like this first, this one, and I'm going to open this one as well. And just copy it. 2 seconds here, guys. Lots of paper. There we go. Okie dokie. Zoom in. Okay, what do we got? So yeah, your sympathetic system, fight or flight. And essentially, if you are scared, it's going to kick in, right? So essentially what you've got here is, what if the following happens? So here you are, right? Look at you. You're just standing there, right? Okay, but then there's this big tree. Look at this. You don't see this right now, but holy doodle. Wow. Like, just, I don't even know what it is, but it's looking pretty, it's huge. And yikes, boy. When you see that, you are going to, you're gonna go bunkers crazy. You're gonna be scared. And that ultimately is your fight or flight response. And look at the pathway here. This is going to be familiar. And do write this down. So the sympathetic, here's what happens when your sympathetic system kicks in, and specifically, it's going to be the fight or flight. So first of all, you get your sensory neuron, because it's going to be familiar. And then your interneuron. Oh yeah, right? So sensory neuron, interneuron. Who would be next? Motor. Now, even if you were so scared that you're basically frozen, motor neuron is actually going to be activated to stimulate the adrenal glands, and they're going to release the epinephrine. And then your heart, and this is going to happen super fast. It's not like this takes a minute or something. This literally happens instantaneously. And I'm sure everyone's felt that something that scares us really quickly, and we just feel like this shock in our system. And it is the epinephrine being released, and our heart rate goes from basically just low to just through the roof. And that specifically what's happening is your motor neuron is stimulating your adrenal gland, which is just above your kidney, to release epinephrine. Okay, for motor neuron, specifically connecting to the adrenal gland. So motor neurons don't always go to muscles, right? That's one of the points right here, right now. They can indeed connect to and have to connect to all kinds of things you have no control over. The adrenal gland now will release epinephrine. This is a specific link between the nervous system and the endocrine system, because endocrine, I mean, that's a fancy way of saying hormone. And epinephrine is a super powerful hormone. Actually, all hormones are very powerful. And this is a direct link from our nervous system to our endocrine system, and it's super fast. Most of them take a lot longer, but if you are hungry, it does take a while for that to develop and for the hormones to be released that basically, tell us, oh, we're hungry, or that, start releasing extra blood sugar into our blood because we're so hungry. That can usually take a long time. This happens instantaneously. Yeah, let's keep looking at this here. I'm going to flip to this slide now. Yeah, response to sudden stress. So ultimately, you get an increase in breathing rate, increase in heart rate. Blood pressure is going to go up. Blood glucose levels go up. Size of the air passages actually expand. Size of the pupils expand. Perspiration. You're going to have a decrease immediately in flow to your digestive organs. Now, this could also cause sudden cramping as well, because basically you might, especially if you're just digesting and then suddenly get in a super frightful situation, could cause a lot of discomfort, although you might be running for your life. Blood flow to the excretory system is cut off. So you're not going to feel like going to the bathroom. Blood flow to reproductive structures cut off. You are just feeling like you should run for your life. Now, if you ever encounter a bear like this, do not run for your life. You need to quietly move away from the bear. Yeah, that's not going to happen because you're going to walk with lots of people when you walk in the forest, and or just know what you're doing when you walk in the forest. If you don't know what you're doing, walk with other people in the forest in Canada, because grizzly bears are really quite dangerous. Yeah. So next, if you're running for your life, eventually you need to stop. So the sympathetic system is if we're scared. The parasympathetic system is rest and digest. It is activated to restore calmness and recovery. You have to recover. Like I said, hormones are super powerful. Epinephrine, adrenaline is the other name for it, is a very powerful hormone, and your body cannot run on adrenaline forever. It can run on it, for a little while, but it just has to stop. Parasympathetic nerves slow the heart rate. They lower blood pressure. They also decrease breathing rate, and they promote digestion. It's the neurotransmitter specifically is called acetylcholine, and it basically controls the organs. Okay, yeah, let's look at right here. More, yeah, sorry. Parasympathetic nervous system acts to restore and conserve energy. Yeah, we've been talking about this. I mean, also, yeah, I mean, really, it's important to know. I mean, this is what we're looking at right here. All of these nerves, because yeah, your central is here. So we're not talking central. The parasympathetic is part of the peripheral nervous system. All these nerves throughout the body, and yeah, we're controlling organs, sending messages. Hey, speed up, slow down. Let's review what we discussed today. So basically, you're going to want to use the summary notes that you took from and take some summary notes from pages 42 to 47 and the student note package right in the course, right in the Moodle course. We've got answers. You got to complete some answers for some sample questions on page 44. I want you to draw the neural pathway. So that's on page 44. Neural pathway, if you see a giant bear, we went over that too in these notes. A stick man whose sympathetic system has been activated. Okay, right? So kind of we already drew that. A stick man whose parasympathetic has been activated. Okay, so what he would look like, basically. I think you kind of know. So stick man who's suddenly been scared, what would he look like? And a stick man who has suddenly been put to sleep. Okay. And yeah, just describe what the parasympathetic does. Well, ultimately, it puts us to sleep, slows heart rate, slows breathing rate. Okay, that's all for today. Take care. We'll see you tomorrow.